But he was Theta Delt. Now, when I was on the residential life committee, and we started to talk about whether or not we should continue to have.
By the way, you know this is being recorded. I just want to say.
When we were starting to talk about whether or not we should continue to have residential fraternities, Michael's old fraternity house was absolutely the most
Vile?
Yes. I don't know what else to say. It was really terrible. Really in bad shape. There was not a single doorknob in the entire house. But there was stuff growing in pots and pans in the kitchen. There was grass coming through the wood floor. I mean, it was just it's unbelievable.
I don't remember it quite that way, but
no,
it
it was 30 years before. Yeah, you were long gone. 30 years before.
Oh, okay.
You had to look at it.
So,
I see.
and I played hockey and soccer, and was in a fraternity.
But most importantly, you were an art major.
I was an art major. Well, you were an art major too, right?
No, history. Paul Parker suggested that I major in another department.
Well, he probably would have liked to, but he couldn't think of a department that would take me. So my good wife, and since we're in Karen's world, likes to tell people that I was a hockey player in search of a major, and that became art. And when I was there, and when Michael was there, when Michael started, first year, there were only 2 art professors at Hamilton. Paul Parker taught art history and played the piano extremely beautifully. And Jim Penny taught studio, and they were both terrific painters.
We actually own a few of their paintings that we have on our house on Martha's Vineyard.
And actually,
They're really beautiful.
our older son has one of Jim Penny's great pictures in his apartment in Tribeca. But I would go to Jim Penny, and you couldn't major in history or studio because there were only 2 professors, so there weren't enough courses. So you had to have a balanced major. And my lowest grades at Hamilton, and I'm hoping that nobody has a contact with the registrar to check this, were in studio art, which was my major. So, but I would go to Professor Penny, and when he was nervous, he got a little cough. And as he would see me coming with one of my works, the cough would intensify. And I would say to myself, oh gosh, should I go over there or am I going to kill him? I mean, I've got to be careful here. And he would collect himself, and he liked to walk around with his palette during these studio classes. And he would look at my work and he would say, you know, this is interesting, but you could have done this. And you could have done that. And how about this? And I'd all of a sudden have a C picture. It was great.
Are any of you studio art majors? Oh, so you really are.
Well, we had some very talented studio painters in our time, but they were if they were art majors, they were taking a balanced load between Parker and Penny. But there were some very good artists. I just didn't happen to be one of them. So
I just have to say this. So Kevin and I dated through college, and I used to go up. I almost flunked out of college because I spent so much time up in Hamilton, and Kevin would have to do a painting, and I would just mix the paint. I'd get the palette, I'd go like this, and we would slap it on together. They were not great. Maybe that's why you didn't do all that course, because you kind of slapped it on with me.
well, I remember you mixing it more than slapping it on, but.
Where were you in school, Karen?
I went to Manhattanville, Catholic Sacred Heart School. I went to a Sacred Heart boarding school.
Which Elizabeth McCormick was the president of when Karen was there. She was a nun. Elizabeth McCormick is Hamilton's easily oldest living trustee. She's now 97, and she was on the board of Kirkland, and was the one who suggested, because Kirkland was never able to raise money. She at a board meeting, she raised her hand and said, "I think we should go to Hamilton and see if they're interested in a merger," which was extremely unpopular. So Elizabeth this was after she'd left Manhattanville and stopped being a nun. Yes?
It seems to be the theme of our day today, so I was wondering if you could elaborate on the path that you continued to walk after Hamilton.
Deeply involved in art, wasn't it?
I think he's talking about business school.
I just mean in general and.
No, I didn't have to worry about getting a job in 1970 because I had a military obligation. I did have to worry about getting into the National Guard, so I didn't go right to Vietnam. But after that, I got a job at a big bank, and then I went to Harvard Business School, which was really quite amazing. I'm sure what happened was there were 800 people in the class. They had 790, and they were down to they had 50 people, and they just put the pictures up on the dartboard, and somebody threw a dart, and they hit me. They said, "Wait a minute, guy's a hockey goalie. He's an art major. When was the last time Harvard Business School had an art major? Why not? Why not?" And it was really daunting because in those days they were going through some self-actualization period at Harvard Business School, and they thought it would be a good idea to tell you where they projected you would finish in the class. And they told me that if I graduated, I would finish last. So my first set of midterm exams at Harvard Business School, I was quite nervous. And so nervous, in fact, that I quit smoking. And I haven't had a cigarette since then. And I did not finish last.
And
I actually
you started when you were 13.
Yeah, I did pretty well. So, and then I went to work at Goldman Sachs after business school.
But you know what I would just say to, I went to medical school when I was 37, and I spent time talking to, young people about having a dream, and you don't have to necessarily actualize it immediately. You can be thoughtful about it. Is that Kevin and I met when we were 11 and 12, and I will say that when you were in high school, you told me you wanted to be an investment banker. Now,
I thought I told you I wanted to be a detective.
No, you told me you wanted to be an investment banker. I think that was a dream you had.
I don't think I had any idea what an investment banker was when I was in high
Kevin,
school.
absolutely.
Okay.
But you knew you were interested in finance.
Yeah.
And to be honest,
That's why I became an art major in Hamilton.
I don't know.
It's all
why you
connected.
became an art major. I don't know, but I would just say that, when Kevin was at Hamilton, he was the goalie of the hockey team, and they had some very good years when he was there.
Only one, actually, but
Won, and you got won some tournament or something.
we didn't quite win it. But
But anyway, he did ballet. They had the.
it wasn't ballet. It was
And there was-
dance. It was dance.
Wow.
It was
I
dance.
have to tell you
When
that
Kirkland opened, all of a sudden,
there was
was
a picture of Kevin in the New York Times.
and Steve Kenny, the captain of the football team, was a tackle.
And Kevin.
You can imagine how graceful the two of us were. It was like Clydesdales can dance.
It was a very, I don't know, it was kind of an interesting time. I mean, we had the Vietnam War, so it wasn't.
It was a period of incredible change at Hamilton. And I think Michael arrived for 1 year as a freshman in an all-male school, and then was there to see Kirkland have a freshman class, a sophomore class, and a junior class. And we both saw a lot of change, but he saw more of it than I did because it was still sort of hazy when I left. But it was pretty firmly established by the time you graduated, right? And where did you go from after graduation?
I worked at the Hirshhorn Museum, like the day after.
And did you get a high draft lottery number?
171. So I was
You were on the cusp.
actually I'd gotten hepatitis while I was in France. Missed the semester, and when I missed the semester, I was drafted. But because I'd gotten hepatitis, I flunked the physical.
B.
Whatever you get from oysters, I never know the right. Bad oysters.
There's a doctor in the house.
Haven't had a-
Specific.
Well, actually, when I had a relapse, I went back into the American hospital in Paris. They checked my arms to see if I was.
Drug addict.
Yeah, I was not.
Okay.
Just bad oysters. I'd never eaten an oyster. Haven't eaten one since, actually.
Really?
But
Oh my
Kevin,
God.
you know what I think's kind of an interesting story for us, for this group, is, and I saw this on the questions all of you asked, is how we started collecting this kind of art. So,
Well, I
a
would
lot of
say,
that has to do with Hamilton.
yeah, a lot of it had to do with Paul Parker and the courses that he taught. And so I walked out of, and of course, do you guys all know about Edward Root? Okay. So there'd been some really interesting artists who'd been resident with the Roots, and we actually had a show probably 15 years ago called Hamilton Collects, and there was a picture of a tree painted by Birchfield that belonged to John Root, and he said he painted this tree when he was staying in our guest house out the window. And then there was a picture by George Lukes of this baby with these beautiful blue eyes and sort of a tuft of blonde hair. And it said John, and it was John Root. George Lukes had painted it because Edward Root was his father. So there was a strong tradition of appreciation for American art there. And I loved Birchfield, I loved Avery, I loved Sheeler, I loved, a lot of those artists from the exposure that I got to them from Paul Parker. So I always thought, boy, wouldn't it be nice if I could buy some art? And I got to a point in my life where that was a possibility. And somebody asked the first thing that I bought, and it was a little Birchfield that's hanging in the dining room of some horse chestnuts. And at the same time, I bought a Milton Avery, which is at our home in Martha's Vineyard. And it got me going a little bit. And we probably have 15 Birchfields. And he's the artist that I don't know why, but I feel particularly interested in his work. And this is kind of a mishmash because we've got things as early as Homer, which really doesn't fit with a lot of the modernists, and things as late as Gottlieb, which also doesn't really fit with a lot of the modernists. But we just started buying what we liked, and we were fortunate enough to see a lot of things and acquire a number of them. Initially paintings, and then we started buying some photographs. And
but we were able to buy photographs by artists that we'd collected. Demuth, some architectural.
Sheeler. Yeah.
So we had their paintings, and then
Well,
we were able to buy their photographs.
Yeah. And of course Stiglitz was involved with so many of these people and was dealer for a lot of them too. So it just doesn't exactly hang together, it's sort of messy, but we just started buying things that we liked. And there are a couple of French photographs in here, but everything else is American.
How about that person in the corner over there?
Oh yeah, and then we acquired a few sculptures too. They're not American.
So where did you buy your first work, the Birchfield, from?
I think it was at Sotheby's, at an auction. I bought the Dove and the Birchfield at an auction at Sotheby's. Yeah.
But we ended up buying a lot of things through dealers, right, Kevin?
Most things through dealers, yeah.
Most of the things you buy through dealers.
But what's happened, sadly, and Michael, I'm sure you're well aware of this, but there was a pretty vibrant American dealer community here in New York. And I think you saw Andy Shelkoff today. I mean, he's like the last man standing. He's the dean at this point, and he's still a relatively young guy. And a lot of the great dealers in American art are gone. So
Why is that?
I don't know. I think because the game is contemporary, and a lot of it is flipping, and I know it's recorded, Michael, and I'd be interested in your comment because you're much more knowledgeable about this area than I am. But I think there's a lot of tricky dealing that goes on in the high-end art market. Things that get bought in by big dealers to protect prices, and trading that goes on among certain houses to also protect and escalate prices. They do it well. I've always thought it would be an interesting thing for the Attorney General to examine someday, but he's got other things to worry about. Donald Trump's tax returns, other things. So.
There's some other questions.
Maddie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I did. Now I lost it. Now I'm really upset. I really wanted to ask this question.
Yeah,
I'll
please
come
do.
to Parker.
How did you determine the layout of all the art, road?
I have a confession. We don't. We actually have worked for many years, really since we started collecting seriously, with two women who are our art advisors. And I think Tracy was astounded that I couldn't find things, but about at least once a year, they come and everything
Because you
gets
know
moved.
what, we actually lend a lot of art, and they try to fill in the blanks, and then because we're having to look like we are Florida residents, which we are.
Well, we are Florida residents.
We've been having to move things down there to show we're serious about being a Florida resident. So-
But we're concerned about moving works on paper to Florida because of the climate and the humidity. So we haven't moved much of it. We've moved a fair number of our oils down there. And somebody asked me earlier about my favorites, and one of them is in Florida. We had just gotten it back. We'd loaned it to the Martha's Vineyard Museum, and it's a Thomas Hart Benton called After the Storm, of a boat on a beach on Martha's Vineyard.
Cracking up.
Yeah.
And how did you come to establish relationships with different museums, whether it's in New York or Martha's Vineyard?
Well, I don't have relationships with museums. They find out what you have. Michael can explain this much better than I
You're
can.
very involved with the Whitney, right? I coach.
Karen is, yes.
They
fellows
mentioned
there.
you yesterday.
And people hear what you have, and we're very happy to entertain people, like all of you tonight. And we have a lot of museum groups here. We've had people from the Met, we've had Central Park Conservancy group people, and people come and see what you have, and then they ask you if you can lend.
Yeah.
And it's good to lend because it makes your painting have a little bit of more, what's the word, provenance?
Yeah.
Right. So.
You remembered your question.
It was before she asked her question, but it was basically her question about lending to museums and whether you feel basically like if you have like a responsibility to promote these artists that maybe haven't gotten the same amount of promotion as maybe European artists.
Well, yeah, and I don't think about it as promoting the artists, but I think about it as giving people an opportunity to appreciate them and to see the breadth of their work. I'm going to get in trouble here, Michael. If I go too far, you got to save me.
We can always edit.
How many of you know who Grant Wood is? Do any of you know the painting American Gothic?
Yeah, you do.
The pitchfork? Yeah.
Grant Wood.
That's Grant Wood. And the Whitney did a Grant Wood exhibition recently. And I went to this exhibition. I thought, well, the guy did one great painting. One great painting. That was it. Because the rest of the stuff I didn't think was very good at all. Now, this is a judgment for him, or for Rob, or for Tracy, not for me. But as a layman looking at this, I thought, man, I would not have done this. And another artist who's painted some beautiful paintings, but he painted the same thing over and over again, hundreds and hundreds of times, and the paintings are all over the place, is Hassam. These pictures of his flags flying on Fifth Avenue. And what you hope is that there's a body of work that really makes people appreciate how terrific an artist was. We had several works in a Birchfield show that Robert Gober actually was the curator for, which was interesting.
At the Whitney, right?
Well, I guess it ended at the Whitney, but it started in Los Angeles, and then it was in Buffalo. And I just thought it was great and varied and gave people a much better sense of Birchfield and the type of stuff that he did. Now, Birchfield was strange because he'd have these years where he exploded. He would, do all sorts of things, 1917 to 1919, and in the 60s, as he was almost dead, he did a number of great paintings. But, then there are a few things for long periods, like a decade, where there's not a tremendous amount of work that's really distinguished. So you just never know. But I think on balance, he's a terrific artist. So I'll stop. Michael, am I in too much trouble here?
You're doing great.
Okay.
Doing great.
how much does the financial value of a piece affect your perception of its worth?
Well,
As in-
it doesn't.
It doesn't
No, the issue is whether or not I can afford it. That's the basic issue. And maybe I collect American art because I couldn't afford contemporary, the really crazy high-end stuff. But I don't think so. I think I collected this because Paul Parker planted a bug in my head, in 1969, and it just wasn't going to go away. And when I thought about what appeals to me, a lot of people come in here and say, "Oh my God, this is so retro. Jeez, get out of this, guy." But this is what I like. So, I'll have a reaction if I think something is way overpriced, but that just means I'm probably not going to buy it. But, no, the financial consideration is not that big a deal, really.
Another question.
I was wondering if you had your eye on anything now, or what your future plans for buying.
No, well, we're in Florida now, and actually Karen's been doing most of the recent buying, and we've got so much
Not
stuff
for
here.
not paintings.
Oh, you bought a big photograph.
Oh, yes, we've changed some art down
Yeah, but we moved a lot of the stuff from here down there. Our problem is we've got too goddamn much stuff, and I'm actually at a point where we're selling stuff because art is not liquid. It's an asset that you can sell sometimes, but if you want to sell a lot of it at once, you're gonna have to accept a big discount. And at my age, my sons are interested in some of these things, but there's just too much of it. So we're more likely at this point in our lives to sell rather than buy.
So it's interesting because we both just turned 70. And
You're not 70, huh?
well,
And I'm 71.
No, but because there are some things that our children like. Our kids are in their early 40s, and we have grandchildren, but it's a burden to leave this with your children. And I felt very strongly that I do not want things going to museums. Now, we did actually just sell a piece to the Met, a beautiful John Sloan, beautiful oil, and it's going to sit in the basement there.
No, it's not.
Well, you don't know that.
No, I don't know that. It's true.
We don't know that. To me,
But it was a huge hole in their collection. They had very little ash can, and I think there's a very good chance
it's a
that's on
beautiful,
display.
Really wonderful. I wish that it was here tonight so you could all see it. But I personally want private collectors to buy our art because look at it. You guys come here and you get to look at this, and we have so many groups of people who come and look at our art with us. It's so fabulous, and so I don't know. It's a different world. I don't know for all of you. Do any of you see yourself as collectors
Or artists.
or artists? I don't know. or
I would
Do you
love
look?
to be either, but
Yeah.
it seems like it's not fully up to me. I feel like there's a good degree of luck that goes into being
well,
able
you're
to
very
do.
young.
You're,
You know,
you're right.
Kevin, how old were we? 1980 what?
Oh,
First-
no. It's,
When did we
I think
bought? 90s?
mid-90s, yeah.
Thanks
so-
to Goldman Sachs
Yeah.
and an IPO. We could
No,
have-
we bought a little bit before that, but
No, but I'm just saying that it's difficult to do, and that's why I encourage young people to really go through galleries and look at up-and-coming people and photographers, and I don't know, what do you think, Tracy? There's a lot out there.
There's so much great stuff out there, and there's so
Yeah.
many great artists whose work is undervalued,
Yes.
and that's accessible.
Or
You just get
unrecognized.
one, and then you
Pardon?
get
or
another one.
unrecognized.
Yeah, exactly. And so a lot of it is just knowing what's out there and being on top of what the trends are, and then.
But it's
being
hard to
able-
have an eye.
Right.
Maybe all of you as art students have an eye, but to go into a gallery, downtown and look at work and think, oh, this is something.
I don't know, Karen. We
Do
got
you
3
find
people in this
something
room who know a
involved?
lot about that, so.
No, I'm talking about these young people. Do you look at something and it catches your eye and you say, Well, you know, I could live with that in my living room. I think it's hard. I've tried to encourage our children and,
It's not entirely true.
no, but yeah.
Yes.
On that topic, is there something about the work that you enjoy that really resonates with you, or, well, of course there is, but do you know what it is that really draws you into these works? Maybe the birch fields, for example. What the quality of it? I mean, you were an art student yourself. Maybe you have some perspective on that.
Well, you know, I think there's a large element, in my case, of nostalgia, and some of it for Hamilton, some of it for Paul Parker. Birchfield was a Buffalo artist. My family's originally from Buffalo. But, you know, he painted in Ohio, where he was from originally. I don't know why. It just locked into my brain. And I like the range of stuff, you know, from the almost musical things on that to the Gothic there. And I told somebody that, you know, one of my favorites in this whole collection is the dandelion seed heads and the moon, the big picture that's in the dining room. But I love a lot of these. I mean, I love this moon picture too. So, and then, you know, I walked into a gallery and I saw this. I thought, wow, I didn't even know who the artist was. But, and I must have something going on with moons and dandelions in my head, right? Some sort of obsession. But, you know, I love this, and then that little, yeah, it's gorgeous. So, you know, I don't know. I've been, you know, there's some themes. There's some continuing themes, and the moon clearly is one of them. But
Our kids are fighting over the dandelion picture because they think it
Oh,
looks
yeah?
like an LSD experience. It's in the, is it in the dining room, the big one? I don't even know where.
yes, it's in the dining room. Yeah,
That's a very well-known
Birchfield.
Birchfield, and the companion to it is in Madrid, in the
Thyssen-Bornemisza.
Luxembourg
Yeah.
Museum.
Yes.
Blue.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Kind of nervous, but I was very excited coming here because you both have an entire building named after you on campus, and it's devoted to like arts and theatrical experience. So like, what to you both is valuable in terms of learning and teaching and enjoying art and practicing it?
Well, it's about the whole liberal arts education. I mean, I know talent as an artist, and I ended up as an art major at Hamilton College. And my dad, by the way, was not that pleased about it. But I thought, you know, this is the one chance I've got to try some things that I may never really be able to do again, to be exposed to things that I may not otherwise know about. And, you know, I was serious about going into business in some fashion, probably into finance. But I really got an appreciation in the time that I spent both trying to paint, and also I was a lot more successful in Parker's courses than I was in Penny's. And I enjoyed it.
You also performed at Exeter, and I mean, you were interested in theater, so I mean, isn't it also
Well, no,
studio?
I didn't. I performed at Hamilton
It's studio.
in a very minor part. So, I mean, to me, it was the opportunity to be exposed to a lot of things.
All of our
That
theater
was
classes.
important to you.
Yeah.
And there was a need there. You know, you have to, when you want to do philanthropy, you look to see where there's a need. And, I mean, something obviously you're interested in, but it's also a need for the students. Isn't that a great building?
You have no clue how important that
When I
building
saw
is
that, I
on
almost
campus.
passed out in the car, I couldn't believe it.
We couldn't believe. Well, do you know where the art studio was that I painted in?
Yes, in Liz.
In where? No. This wasn't there.
Oh, because that's Kirkland, right?
It was at the top of Root Hall. And I had this vision of this incredible sunny space with Jim Penny with his palette walking around, and some more talented classmates like John Seuss with their wonderful things, Marty Sherman. There were some guys who really could paint, and I loved that room. I just thought it was so great. And we went up there 2 years ago, And I thought, oh my God, this is dismal. I mean, how did we do this? What did I think? You know, we were already at that point working on improving the arts facilities. In fact, the building was open, but it was such an obvious need. And yeah, there was list, but you know, it really wasn't going to get it done. So, you know, I would just say, on a somewhat sad note, somebody who was incredibly important to that building was Sam Pellman, and so selfless, so typical. He had no skin in the game. I mean, he's doing this not for music.
He is Sam Pellman?
Yeah, yeah. You guys were all there when he was killed, I assume. But he really made a huge contribution, and he did it just as a great citizen of the faculty at Hamilton College. So I think about him fondly when I see that building. And not to mention Steve Bologna and Karen Leach and many, many other people. Rob, I'm sure, had a big part in designing that building. So I can stop.
So you talked a lot about your two-dimensional pieces, but I just was wondering more about like your three-dimensional and porcelain, like non-Western art, and what drew you to like collecting these objects.
Well, I can't talk about the porcelains, but the Asian art, it was actually pretty simple. Through my cousin, I met a very famous dealer who I'm sure Michael knew well, Doris Weiner.
Here in New York City.
Here in New York. And she was, at that point, she was probably in her late 70s. And she'd basically been going to India for 25 years and finding things, and then finding things all over Southeast Asia. And she had this incredible collection of things. And I just, you know, I'm not religious, and I'm definitely not a Buddhist. But these things I thought were just so beautiful, they just grabbed me. And they're so old. The grace, I just couldn't get out of my head. So I bought a few things, and then I bought many too many.
I guess you don't want to say a comment about these works, right?
No,
I'm going to. So you know,
I'd rather you didn't.
It's difficult when years and years ago when you bought these sculptures, because now people are worried about their provenance. And it's, I think, something that weighs on us. Would I say you're right, Kevin?
Yeah,
It does.
but we had a lot of respect for Doris. Sadly, her daughter.
And you know, Doris died, and her daughter took over her business and went to jail.
Who did not take over her business. Her daughter had her own business.
But she went to jail.
No, she didn't go to jail. She was arrested.
She was
She was arrested. Because of the provenance issue on some of the
No,
pieces that she
very-
dealt in.
You know, and if you know, even with paintings, you have to worry about provenance. There's a lot of semi-illegal stuff going on in this world, right? Do you believe, Michael? Do you agree with me?
You have to be careful. for
You have to
sure.
be very, very careful. I think people
Well,
aren't.
Michael's not going to say much because the High Museum has all the great art from the Gardner Museum that was stolen in the late 90s. They're in the basement at the High, and
It was in Michael's secret office.
yeah.
So Kevin's referring to the most, the best-known art theft of modern times.
Well, no,
In Boston.
no, second best. I think the Mona Lisa was probably.
Okay, in the latter
Many.
part, half of the
Yeah.
20th century,
There's more. How many paintings were stolen out of these?
Five.
Five.
five, including a Vermeer, and there are only
32, 33, yeah.
32.
And they've never
No.
found them.
Turner, Degas.
Mystery.
We're actually doing a show about this in spring 2021, so stay tuned, guys.
So
Are you
Michael,
going to reveal who took them?
Now, we're doing a show with Kota Azawa, and it's all about stolen art, and it's particularly about the Gardner heist.
so Michael, what's the estimate of the value of those 5 pieces?
Oh, I don't know, somewhere, Andy Shulkoff was throwing around such huge numbers today that if I said 50 to 100 million, it wouldn't seem like that.
But the
much.
Vermeer alone,
Yeah.
The Vermeer is rare, so.
So, but you know, if you even look, you know, if at World War II and art that was stolen and is still not been returned, it's,
Yeah.
the history
It's fine.
of art theft is fascinating. Is that gonna be part of your course, Tracy?
Well, I kind of
Looking at-
gave them a little bit
at
of
Germany?
this last week or 2 weeks ago. We talked a lot about all the complicated issues of collecting. Everything from, NAGPRO, which is the Native American restitution of objects, from Nazi looted objects, from, ancient Assyrian
Right.
objects. So we've been talking about this in the class because it is a complicated issue. And it's one that I think as a museum, we have a responsibility to be completely open.
Kevin, can I ask you a quick question on the John Marin there?
Yeah.
Which I think is just a super great thing.
his frame and a frame within a frame. I think there are 4 frames there.
Yeah, yeah, so it's the total object as he created, he controlled the frame and then drew the frame inside the frame.
Yeah.
And then the image within the multiple frames. And it seems like it's so fresh, so it's such a
It's
such good
amazing, yeah.
condition. Do you remember when you saw that?
Well, I saw it in a show, a Marin show, sometime in the early 90s, and it wasn't for sale. And then we bought a couple of other Marins, and we were told that this could be acquired, so we bought it, probably late 90s, from his daughter-in-law.
Have you had to conserve the frame?
No.
Seems
Oh,
like-
well, we send everything when we get it, but no, the frame's in great shape.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah,
Just
it is
the
amazing.
movement that's on it, it does seem so fresh.
Yeah.
Tracy and I were talking about that earlier, actually, the frames that are on the works. Are many of them are ones that you chose the frames, or are some of them, are many of them original? What's the kind of-
No, almost none of them are original. Almost all of them were, with the exception of that, were put on by a frame dealer in New York named Eli Wilner.
He's a great framer.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
he's not shy in terms of his prices. You may have noticed that.
I have, but I paid them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he does the research and he tries to match frames to artworks that have affinities with the original period, right?
Oh, you're so trusting. Such a lovely person. You're a New Yorker. Come on. He's a good businessman. But yeah, I think he does a terrific job.
Yeah.
So, but how much historical relationship there really is to what he's putting on these things, and there's not a lot. I mean, I've thrown away a lot of frames, right? Gotten virtually nothing for them, but I think they do look a lot better when he's finished.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we never even thought about letting him touch that.
And it's something, just a small point, is that you use non-reflective glass, which is wonderful, especially so works on paper, usually framed with glass. And if you use non-reflective glass, the viewer has a much more direct experience of the work.
We also have coatings on all the windows here. But most of the time, if you walk by this building, you'll see that the shades on the 12th floor are down, because we've got so many works on paper that we really don't want them to be. The fact that we keep them up all the time is bad enough, but we don't want them to get direct sunlight.
Anybody else?
Kind of just following up with the idea of conservation, what does that look like as someone with a private collection? Like,
Well, virtually everything that I buy, depending on what it is, will go to an expert in conservation when I acquire it. And they will, before I acquire it, in fact, they will check it and they will decide whether anything needs to be done. And because we've got so many works on paper, the person that we've relied on most often is a very senior person at the Met who you probably know, Marjorie Shelley.
I know
Do you know
the name,
Marjorie?
I don't
Yeah. Do you know her, Tracy? So she's looked at virtually everything, and in some cases we haven't bought things because there were some real issues. And in another case, we bought something where other people thought there were real issues, and we didn't think there were. So we bought it at a very attractive price. Would anybody like another glass of wine, or one more question?
Sorry, just when my lights are rearranged, can you change the position of these lights?
Yes, we
for the
can.
person who's
Yes, we
looking at
can. This is a crazy lighting system, but it's really effective.
That's awesome.
And when we originally had it installed, we put it in. We put it in about probably 12 years ago. We moved out of the apartment for 3 months because there was so much that had to be done. It wasn't really going to be possible to inhabit it. So, but it's worked out really well, and it's been great. We don't have anything like this in Florida, and I don't think we will unless we really move a lot of works down there. Yes.
Have you done anything else to the apartment for viewing sake of the art?
For the sake of the art? No. No. I mean, other than coating all the windows and keeping the shades down. But it's, the temperature is controlled, and I think it's a pretty hospitable environment.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, guys.
Wait till you see the edits of this performance.